Noah's Ark has been found. In the late 1950s, a man in eastern Turkey made an incredible discovery that is the long-awaited proof for many Christians. But how is this possible? Does the biblical myth have a kernel of truth after all? Did Noah really build a colossal ship that saved his family and animals from the flood? Can the discovery stand up to scientific scrutiny? Time to get to the bottom of it. A remote corner of Turkey in 1959, Air Force Captain İlhan Durupınar is completing a reconnaissance flight to map a highland region in the east of the country. A few years earlier, the area had been shaken by 3 major earthquakes, so the government is now requesting photos of the current situation. The flight is pure routine, until something exceedingly strange catches Durupınar's eye. As the plane flies over the barren rocky landscape, the man in the cockpit notices a bizarre structure on the ground, which he naturally photographs. The developed photos finally reveal something that no one had expected. The strange structure seems to be the remains of a huge ship. But what on earth is a ship doing in the middle of nowhere? Without knowing it, Durupınar may have answered one of the biggest biblical questions ever. Where is Noah's Ark? The story of Noah's Ark is told in the first book of Moses. So we read here that God repents of his creation. When the Lord of the world sees how great is the wickedness of man, he decides to destroy them and the animals. Only one is spared the wrath of the Creator, the God-fearing Noah. As a pious man without blame, Noah receives the order from God to make a box of fir wood and to paint it from the inside and outside with pitch. The box is to be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Furthermore, it should have 3 floors and a door located in the middle of one side. Warned of the approaching flood, Noah saves not only himself and his family, but also a pair of each of the animals. No sooner said than done. While the rest of creation is swallowed up by the gigantic masses of water, Noah, his family, and the animals are safe on the ark. After a seemingly endless time, Noah, who is already over 600 years old at this point, receives the divine message that the earth has dried and that he should leave the ark. By the way, we also know where the ark was at this time. Thus, the relevant passage states, "On the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark touched down on Mount Ararat." The Ararat anomaly. As we can see, Noah received extremely detailed instructions for the construction of the ark. From the size, to the number of stories, to the wood, God's plan left no questions unanswered. So if today we find a millennia-old structure suspected of being the true ark, we could easily match the discovery with the information we find about it in the Bible. But unfortunately, it is not quite that simple. As mentioned, the ark ran aground on the mountain Ararat at the end of the flood. But what reads like a clear place specification in the first moment splits the researchers in truth into different camps. One thing is certain, there really is a mountain called Ararat. It is located in the Armenian highlands in eastern Anatolia, and at 5,137 meters is the highest mountain in Turkey. But this is where things get a little tricky. Does the corresponding biblical passage really refer to that very mountain? Those who answer this question with no believe that no specific peak is meant here, but rather the mountainous region of the Urartian Empire in general. Located in the east of Asia Minor, Urartu became a major power before it was conquered by the Medes about 300 years later. And yet there are people who are convinced that we should take the information from the first book of Moses literally. Thus, in 1949, aerial photographs of Ararat appeared, which are called Ararat anomaly by some and remnant of Noah's Ark by others. In the corresponding images, we can see a dark spot adorning the western plateau, apparently several hundred meters in size. But does this circumstance also coincide with the data from the Bible? The ark was 300 cubits long, but this was not a fixed unit of length. Depending on the interpretation, a cubit corresponded sometimes to 45 and sometimes to 60 centimeters. The bottom line is that the length range is between 135 and 180 meters. Now, a lot of time has passed since 1949, enough time to thoroughly investigate the mountain anomaly. Well, that's what you would think anyway. In truth, however, it was to take several decades before images of the strange formation were released. While some specialists did not exclude a man-made structure, other experts came to the conclusion that we are dealing with a 5-million-year-old, unusually shaped limestone formation. Does this mean that the search for traces around Ararat is obsolete? Well, not necessarily. The photos that Ilhan Durupinar took in the 1950s were taken just a few kilometers south of the mountain. Myth or reality? Despite this, many historians and researchers are of the opinion that the search for the Ark will never be crowned with success, for the very simple reason that the Ark never existed. The same would apply meanwhile also to the devastating flood. Thus, the catastrophe had rather been a metaphorical warning intended to exhort people to lead a God-fearing life. Yet, strangely enough, the Bible is by no means the only source to report an all-destroying flood. While we also find the story of Noah's Ark in the Quran, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Chinese, and the indigenous peoples of Mesoamerica also knew comparable narratives. Given some striking parallels, many experts suspect that the story of the biblical Noah's Ark is based on a passage from the ancient Gilgamesh epic. As Gilgamesh searches for immortality, Utnapishtim reveals that he was once warned by the god Enki of a great flood. Since this would destroy all life on Earth, Utnapishtim was advised to build a great ship and save his family and the animals of the steppe. Controversial alternative researchers such as Graham Hancock, on the other hand, assume that the flood catastrophe actually took place at the end of the last ice age. In detail, the apocalypse led to the downfall of an advanced civilization that has since been completely forgotten. The few survivors had subsequently traveled out into the world to bring the gift of civilization to the simpler peoples. But when does a fictional tale become a tangible memory? And at what point does a myth turn into reality? Of course, when the corresponding theories can be clearly proven. And let's imagine that Durupinar's photographs actually show the remains of Noah's Ark. Wouldn't it then be obvious to conclude that all the other words of the Bible are authentic as well? The traces of the flood. Officially, the formation discovered in 1959 is not called Noah's Ark, but Durupinar, in reference to its discoverer. Besides its location near Mount Ararat, the length of 160 meters also seems to match the biblical description. However, at this point we should remember another important point. Without the water, even the largest ship loses its meaning. Or, to put it another way, is there any evidence that the region was once inundated by a gigantic flood? The surprising answer is yes. In 1997, a team of geologists, geophysicists, and oceanographers analyzed the area around the Black Sea. In the process, the experts found evidence of what they henceforth referred to as the Black Sea Flood. For example, the experts came across the remains of freshwater fish at the bottom of the inland sea. In detail, the age of the fossils could be dated to 7,000 to 8,000 years. The analysis of the bedrock also showed that the investigated site was once in a freshwater lake and has changed rapidly. The theory is that a colossal glacier collapsed about 8,000 years ago. As a result, global sea levels rose rapidly, flooding all surrounding regions, including the area we now know as the Black Sea. And let's be clear, every day an amount of water equivalent to 200 times the water mass of Niagara Falls flowed into the area. But that's not all. This process continued for 300 days at a stretch. The freshwater lake, which became the Black Sea, increased in size by 1.6 kilometers per day. What was just on land disappeared within a few hours at the bottom of the ocean. Durupinar. Against this background, an exciting question now arises. Did Ilhan Durupinar really photograph the wreck of Noah's Ark at the time? From a purely scientific point of view, the answer is probably not. Thus, the examined rock samples could not reveal any evidence for petrified wood. The analysis of supposed rivets, bolts, and washers, which Noah is supposed to have made, revealed the rusty iron parts to be oxidized magnetites containing titanium. In the end, the conclusion was that we are clearly dealing with in situ rock. The peculiar ship shape of the structure is again due to the influence of mud flows. But even if Durupinar has a purely geological and not a biblical background, is the whole story in itself not striking? Why did so many different peoples who officially never met tell about one and the same story? Is it possible that the flood really existed and that the remains of the real Noah's Ark are still out there somewhere? And if so, will we ever rediscover them? Do you love exciting videos like this? Then give us a thumbs up and a subscription and stay up to date from now on.